It was the Woodstock of Europe in 1970. I mean, there were 600,000 people. The population of the Isle of Wight now is only 150,000, so it was probably below 100,000 then. And it just became iconic because it had the Doors, Jimi Hendrix's last big performance, The Who doing Tommy. It was a bonding of a generation, and because of that, they banned it for 32 years by an Act of Parliament.
It was the size of it and the range of it. You had Joni Mitchell, very quiet with alto harp and piano. Then you had Jethro, Tull, 10 years after. You had avant-garde jazz. I mean, I was completely blown away by Miles Davis. And it went on day and night for 5 days. I mean, this is lovely today, but you imagine this with 500,000 people. You know, it was just extraordinary.
It became huge. It was supposed to be 400,000, and I think it ended up as 675,000, some estimates even higher.
The numbers that are there are often exaggerated. I'm not going to quote a figure on how many were there, but it was pretty big though.
I was aware that it was bigger than anything before it. In other words, it was even bigger than Woodstock. It was considered the last great event, and it wasn't anything like it was not going to happen after that.
I can see we're going to have one hell of a great festival. I really do feel that.
It was quite a big enterprise by the time we got to the 70 Festival. We went rather overboard in terms of what we were doing. We set up offices, which we hadn't had the previous year. We had 40 or 50 people working there. The whole thing was just getting bigger and bigger. So the budget was sort of running out of control as well. Also, we were having to pay artist balances as the event was progressing, having 50% paid in cash on the day. And they wanted literally cash, they didn't want a cheque or anything. So we were counting out the money from the box office, basically. And we were really relying on hundreds of thousands of people to break even.
You will not be allowed in without a ticket, so please have a ticket.
The arena was set at the foot of a hill, and the hill was owned by the National Trust. And we were in contract with the National Trust to fence it off, because they didn't want people on their land. And we didn't want them on there either, as it happened, because it would be overlooked and people wouldn't need to buy a ticket. So we had every reason to fence it off, and every time we tried to fence it off, as quickly as we put out fencing, they took it down.
No fence, fence, no festival.
These agitators or anarchists, whatever you want to call them, they were sort of some of them quite hardline people who were saying it should be a free festival.
This festival business is becoming a psychedelic concentration camp. Power to the people!
It's not that it was necessarily very badly organised, but it had got so much bigger than I think they anticipated it would be, just in terms of the numbers of people attending. The security fences were not impregnable. And during the course of the festival, by the time we got to the third day, it was getting pretty nasty outside. A lot of people had arrived who couldn't get in, didn't have tickets, and there was no way to fit them in. And they were getting pretty angry, to the point where the fences were broken down, and it ended up in chaos.
There was this influx of political activists, and they burst the barriers at the back, but then a lot of people that had arrived on the Isle of Wight who didn't have tickets came in, so it really went to pieces.
We put this festival on, you bastards! We worked for 1 year for you pigs! And you want to break our walls now? Well, you go to hell!
Far from being a laid-back kind of hippie love and peace thing, it was resembling an episode from The Walking Dead. I mean, it was getting very ugly out there. And so we were well aware of what was happening at that point, that it was getting pretty scary. We also knew we weren't going to get paid because there was no money. And I don't know about the other acts.
Did you get paid in the end?
Nope. Didn't matter though.
I'd come almost with the intention of doing the show, and if we got paid, we got paid. If we didn't, we didn't, and we didn't. But, you know, it was a fairly prestigious thing to be doing because we were still relatively early on in our, we'd only been together for a couple of years. And Jimi Hendrix, Jethro Tull, I think the Moody Blues, I think we were the sort of closing act on the final day. And Jimmy, he wanted to go on before Jethro Tull. He was unhappy that he we beat him to it to get our gear set up. So his crew were trying to set up their equipment while my guys were setting up our stuff, and we got plugged in first and started. And Hendrix had to go back to his dressing room and wait, and he had to close the show, by which time it was getting fairly unpleasant. A lot of bad stuff happening in the periphery of the audience, and it was the last time I saw him was as I walked away with the thought, have a good one, Jimmy. And very sadly, of course, a few weeks after that, he lost his life.
The thing about Hendrix is he was a bit of a showman. He had an aura around him. He used to manage to sort of summon up something. He was quite extraordinary, very graceful performer. So he had this kind of thing where he kind of, you couldn't take your eyes off him.
He came on very late, 2 or 3 a.m, and he was blazing. The last hour, that was really most of the iconic performance, was just beautiful performance. And again, the fact it was in the middle of the night made it very special, very strange. It was like a dream, a waking dream.
Foxy.
I think in a way the Isle of Wight does have a fitting place in a kind of societal marking of the end of an era, because it was the end of the whole hippie drippy ideal. The love and peace thing came to a pretty sordid end. But also, perhaps more importantly, it became an object lesson in, you want to do festivals, you've got to get it right. You can't take on more than you can chew and be hoping that somehow love and peace is going to get you through. So the organisers of that particular festival learned a sorry lesson, which I hope may have saved somebody else's bacon later on in realising how wrong these things can go when they get out of hand.